Hi, everybody. This is Dr. Robyn MacKillop with Get That GED. And today we're going to go over some language arts and social studies problems just to dig into readings and how to get through them a little bit faster during the test. We all know time is the biggest issue on the tests. If there was no timer, every one of you would pass every test the first time because you'd have time to think about what was going on. But they do that on purpose by design. And more people, the majority of people who don't pass the first or second time, it's more of a timing issue than a knowledge issue. Again, if you had enough time, you all would pass it. But those timers, they're not great. Not at all. All right, let's take a look at, let me get so you can read it. And then I'm going to share my screen. All right. All right, we have got opposing or methods of opposing generals. Everybody can see that? And there's only one question. What is the ultimate goal both generals share? We're going to have to read it because there's not enough information in that for us to answer the question or to pinpoint a certain part of the reading. So we'll read it. It's not a long one, and it's good information. It's good for the social studies test. Generals Robert E. Lee and William T. Sherman both secured their places in U.S. history as a result of their efforts during the U.S. Civil War. Lee rose to become general-in-chief of all Confederate armies, and Sherman led Union troops in crucial battles at Shiloh, Chattanooga, Atlanta, and Savannah. Believing that the means to ultimate success was to defeat Union troops on Northern soil, Lee led his army of Northern Virginia into Pennsylvania in early 1863. Lee's aim was to capture the railroad hub at Harrisburg, Pennsylvania, and force Union troops in Virginia to move north to engage him. While marching through the fields of Pennsylvania, Lee forbade his troops from looting the farms or destroying any homes. The Confederate troops used useless Confederate money to pay for the food they took to support their army. Nearly a year later, in May of '64, Sherman began his march through Georgia to the sea. Unlike Lee, Sherman encouraged his men to take all the food and livestock from the farms they passed. Sherman needed food because he was cut off from Union supplies. He also burned homes and barns. Sherman's aim was to demoralize the South and destroy supplies that could be used to aid the Confederates. He was certain that not only defeating the Confederacy, but also obliterating the Southerners' will to wage war was vital in preserving the Union after the war's end. So there's something that both generals wanted. Did they both want to control new territory? Did they both want to take food and livestock from farmers? Did they want to destroy the fighting spirit of the other side? Or did they want the war to end with victory? If you're a general in an army, what do you want? Let's take a look at 8. We'll go through these since none of you are going to throw out which one you would do if you were the general. Both wanted to control new territories. Not really. They were looking to defeat the other side, decimate the other side. So I mean, you could say, well, yeah, they wanted more territory, but it wasn't a land grab. It was defeat the other side so that either the United States or the Confederated States can continue to survive. So A is out. It would be a good maybe if you were doing yes, no, maybe, but it's not really, they didn't really want to control land. And then B, both wanted to take food and livestock from farmers. Well, Sherman did that, but Lee was very clear to his soldiers, you at least pay, even though the money is no good, you at least try to make retribution for the things that you take or need. So B doesn't work for this question. Each wanted to destroy the fighting spirit of the other side. That's likely true on a ethereal plane, but for what we read, not really. So that doesn't really fit. And then each wanted the war to end with victory on his side. A general in the army wants to win, period. So the answer is D. It was a lot of reading for that answer, but the reading was helpful for social studies. Nice. Let's go to the next one. Let me see if I want to do Minnesota Twins. This one was on, shoot. Sorry, I hope I'm not making you seasick. Compare and contrast. Yeah, let's do Minnesota Twins. We'll finish with compare and contrast. GED loves to give you questions where you're comparing two things. Love it. And the writing is always a comparison where you're picking a side and saying, well, this side, I'm with this side because. All right, so Minnesota Twins study. We've got 1, 2, 3, 4 questions. And the questions, just a brief glance, we're probably going to have to read. How does comparing identical twins? Yeah, we're going to have to read for that one. Number 3, at least, we can go directly to paragraph 2. Number 4, we can go directly to paragraph 3. And then number 5, what was surprising about the comparison? So we have to read for the first one and the last one. When identical twins are raised apart, you can disentangle nature and nurture for a given characteristic by simply measuring how similar the twins are. You can double check your answer by comparing the similarity of identical twins who share all their genes and of fraternal twins who share only half their genes. The Minnesota researchers tracked down every pair they could find and measured traits related to almost every aspect of life, health, cognition, personality, happiness, career, creativity, politics, religion, sex, and much more. The Minnesota study reveals genetic effects on virtually every trait. The breakdown between nature, nurture, and everything else varies from trait to trait. But Ms. Segal emphasizes the uniformity of the results, the consistent power of genes, the limited influence of parenting. Some findings go down easy. As most would expect, identical twins raised apart have virtually identical heights as adults. Some findings seem obvious after the fact. Genes, but not upbringing, have a pretty big effect on personality traits like ambition, optimism, aggression, and traditionalism. Other findings perennially cause outrage. The IQs of separated identical twins are almost as similar as their heights. Critics of intelligence research often hail the importance of practice rather than inborn talent, but a 3-day test of the Minnesota Twins' motor skills showed that how much you benefit from practice is itself partly an inborn talent. That's interesting. That means you don't have to do these 1,000 million times. Paragraph 4. Let me bring this down a little bit. Many of the study's findings are bipartisan shockers. Take religion, where almost everyone attributes to socialization. Separated twin data shows that religiosity has a strong genetic component, especially in the long run. Parents had less influence than they thought over their children's religious activities and interests as they approached adolescence and adulthood. The key caveat, while genes have a big effect on how religious you are, upbringing has a big effect on the brand of religion you accept. Identical separated sisters, Debbie and Sharon, Both liked the rituals and formality of religious services and holidays, even though Debbie was a Jew and Sharon was a Christian. So this was a study that was written about in 2012. So it's not terribly old. And twin studies are always interesting. All right, so how does comparing identical twins who are raised apart help scientists understand the importance of nature and nurture? Is it because twins have the same genes but different upbringings, and scientists can determine the extent to which upbringing and genes affect traits? Is it scientists can determine whether genes affect upbringing, or scientists can compare identical twins raised apart from fraternal twins raised together, or because these twins have the same genes and similar upbringing, scientists can compare the effect of genes and upbringing. So how does comparing identical twins help scientists understand nature versus nurture? These are not easy answers. There's a lot of verbiage, and they seem semi-similar. Did someone give the answer?
We can answer by scientific information.
Yes. Absolutely.
Is A.
It is A. Perfect. Yep, because the twins have the same genes, but they were brought up differently because they were separated.
Yeah.
That really helps scientists to determine what traits are coded in your genetics versus how you were raised. It's very interesting. Genetics are something else. They're strong. In paragraph 2, the author says the study compared different traits in the twins raised apart. What did researchers find that the twins had in common? So this is paragraph 2, at least if you need to go back and look, you know right where to look. Genes had the greatest effect on a person's health. Effects of nature and nurture were the same. Parenting had no effect, or genes had the most effect. And look at the last sentence of paragraph 2.
C.
Which one?
C.
Sorry, did D like dog or C like cat?
C. Cat.
Parenting had no effect.
B.
Look at the very last sentence of paragraph 2. The consistent power of genes, limited influence of parenting. You're
similar.
C. And the reason that C is not correct, even though they talk about in limited influence of parenting, is they said no effect, which is very absolute. And when you get an answer that says something like all or every or none or never, those generally are not the correct answer, because if you think about it, very little in this world is hard and fast, black or white. There's always a gray part. You know, even if we said, oh, I will never eat cucumbers. It happens. You get a salad with a cucumber in it and you ended up eating it, even though you've tasted it. And now, you know, you're not going to spit it out in the middle of a dinner. You know what I mean? There's never always or never, never. I just used an absolute. I said there's never an absolute. There's very rarely an absolute. So, does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah, so generally speaking, 98% of the time, if you see an answer with all, never, it's not the right answer because it's too specific. All right, let's look at number 4. In paragraph 3, which contrast do the signal words but not make? So this is not a question I like. I do not like these kinds of questions. They're asking you to figure out why the author used certain words. And that shouldn't be your job in this test, but it happens once in a while. So let's find where it says, but not. Here we go. Genes, but not upbringing, have a pretty big effect on personality. So what contrast does but not make? Does it mean that genes have a big effect on personality and upbringing does not? Does it mean some findings are obvious, but others are obvious only after the fact? Does it mean genes have a big effect on ambition, but less of an effect on aggression? Or is it findings are easier to understand? Some findings are easier to understand.
Is it D?
It is not D.
I think
B.
so. A or A.
Did you say A?
Yeah.
Yeah, it is A. And it's a terrible question, and it's not,
Yes.
it's not a useful question.
Yes.
I'm not sure what they're trying to make you, I don't know what they want you to know about that question. So hopefully you won't get one like that on the test, because this book is a little, it's a 2014. Most of it's great, but every so often there are questions. It's like, oh, please do not put these on the test. They're useless. That's a useless question, but good job. It's A. And then the last one, what was surprising about the comparison of religion in identical twins raised apart? And that'll be in paragraph 4. Was it that genes did not have a big effect on how religious the twins were, or upbringing had a big effect, or genes had a big effect, or genes had an effect on the religions that twins chose? Very similar answers, just slightly nuanced. One makes
B.
sense.
B.
So upbringing had a big effect on how religious the twins were.
Yeah.
This is one of those icky ones right here. Genes have a big effect. Upbringing has a big effect on the brand that you choose. See how they did that?
Is it A? You said what?
It's going to be C.
C.
Yeah, genes had a big effect on how religious the twins were. But, and this is a confusing because those answers are so similar.
Yeah.
You know, it's an idea that's slightly different, not, it's, yeah, it's just, it's one, and if you run into something like that on the test, do not spend too much time on it. Just pick one, and you can always flag the question. If you have time at the end, you can go back and look. But answer everything. Don't spend too much time on one that seems muddy. To me, this one is very muddy. It's not clear.
Yeah.
And what you don't have is time to go digging through, looking for certain words. All right, let's do a myth about federal employees. I like these nice short ones. They're just easier to deal with.
I have question, Miss Robyn.
Oh, yes.
how to learn how to guess the questions when they confusing like this, multi-choice.
One of the things that helps is reading bad questions like this one. And what you really have to do is you look at the answers and you kind of get what they're going after. They're going after the comparison of genetics and upbringing in the kind of religion or how religious people are. So what they asked was, the question itself is really vague. What's surprising about the comparison? That is vague. Then you get to A, genes did not have a big effect. We can eliminate that with this sentence right here, so we can get rid of A. Upbringing had a big effect on how religious they were. You know, they talk about upbringing and they say right here, parents have less influence than they thought over their children's religious activities. So B, I would put in the maybe slot as I'm going through these. I wouldn't cross it off totally, but I wouldn't say yes for sure. And then C, genes had a big effect on how religious the twins were. So they reference that right here. Oh, it was the one I highlighted. While genes have a big effect on how religious, that's the key word. So you're looking for words that you can sort of match in order to really see what the question's asking. And this is the key sentence here in the reading for number 5. But you have to dig through it, and you don't have time during the test to dig through it. So while you're studying, when you find questions like this, go ahead and dig into it, because the more you do that in studying, the easier it will be if you get a question of that ilk while you're taking the test. There is usually a word somewhere in the paragraph or in the answers that connect, but you don't always have time to find it because it can be one word, like the how.
Yeah.
This was how.
Yes.
And it's frustrating. It would be much easier if they just said, so in comparing genes versus upbringing and how people wanted to practice religion, you know, they could ask a much clearer question, and they could give answers that were a little more delineated, because these are all the same words. So it's not a great answer that I gave you. It's a very long answer that I gave you, but really it's finding the connection between, it'll be one sentence in the reading and one word in the answer. And it's not great. It's not a great response. But keep reading these types of things. You know, when you get a series of questions for a reading, the Steck-Von book, this is out of the Steck-Von. I like them a lot because they're really good at giving you questions like that. I just don't want you to have those questions on the test. They're much better when you're practicing, not when you're doing. All right, a myth about federal employees. And this is just a single sentence. We're looking for the author's point of view. And point of view is kind of, it's the perspective of the author. Is the author for something, against something? What are they trying to relay to you? So you're looking at what the author is thinking. All right. The notion that federal workers consistently earn higher salaries than comparable private sector workers has become an accepted truth. Conservative think tanks, including the Cato Institute, make much of data that does not offer fair comparisons of similar public sector and private sector jobs, or account for how experience and education affect pay. That's a big sentence. That's a lot. a pediatrician with a small practice in Des Moines and a doctor at the National Institutes of Health, who's leading a team of 50 researchers trying to cure cancer, they both provide health care, but we shouldn't expect that they be paid the same. Though some critics question their accuracy, government analysis shows that federal employees make on average 24% less than their private sector counterparts. In addition, the average private sector salary in 2010 for recent college grads was $48,000. Entry-level federal workers start at $34,000 or $42,000 for candidates with superior academic achievement. They give you a lot of filler in this. There are a lot of filler words that you don't need. They could have given you a much shorter paragraph. So we're looking for the author's point of view. Federal employees need to be paid more for their work. Do you think he's saying that? Because that's what you're going to do with each of these answers. Is the author actually trying to say that?
No.
No.
Government analysis of federal pay are inaccurate.
Yes.
I
Is he
think so.
trying to relay that?
Yes.
And right here, this answer is talking about one aspect. When they talked about pay, when they were doing analysis, they were comparing, right? They were talking about two sectors. See what they did with B? You want to, the government analysis of federal pay is inaccurate. What he said was the comparison was inaccurate. See what they did? One word, and they threw it off. It's actually not B.
Uh-huh.
Because that's looking at just federal, and the analysis was looking at both. So A and B are out after all that. C, federal employees should be paid the same as private sector employees. Did he say that?
No. No.
And then federal
It's-
employees
it's
are not overpaid compared with private sector
It's
workers.
B. Is it B?
It was D, yep. Because he said federal employees are not paid more. They're paid 24% less. And this is classic GED right here. That looked like a great answer until if you had time, you'd say, wait a minute, they're talking about federal pay, and up there they were talking about federal versus private. It's not great. I don't love it. They're gotcha questions, and I don't like them because they're not teaching you anything. You know, you're not taking anything away from it. I think we did this one last week. Yeah. National parks. Then we'll do, I think, what time is it?
This-
And we may
What
wrap
do you
up.
think? The C was the correct thing?
For the last one that we did,
Yeah.
that was D.
D.
Federal employees are not overpaid compared with private sector. And he says that right here.
Okay.
Oops, I just blew out the whole thing.
Yeah. Got it. Got it. Yes. Right.
Yeah. And we did, you have this one twice because we did this one last week. And then we'll do thinking in the age of the internet. All right. The question is, what is the most accurate inference to make from the statement, once I was a scuba diver in the sea of words? You may be able to answer this question without reading because they're giving you a quote from the reading. So we'll check the answers and see if we can answer it. If not, we'll go back and read. And that's one of the reasons why it's a good idea to check the questions first, because sometimes you can answer them without reading. And that saves you time. Okay, so we're looking for what is the most accurate inference, and an inference is not something that they say, but something that you perceive them saying. Once I was a scuba diver in the sea of words. Was the author taking his time to delve deeply and process information? And think about the title as well, Thinking in the Age of the Internet. Was the author moving quickly through vast quantities of words? The author lost sight of how information should be obtained, or the author used the internet to find information about scuba diving. There's a couple of those you can probably cross off and get yourself down to 2.
The process first.
Say that again.
Get the process first.
Yes.
Is A.
Yes, it is. Excellent. And you didn't even have to read the paragraph. So that's something to think about. If they give you a quote in the question, oh, that doesn't look good. What happened there? I've got a weird cursor. I don't know what happened. If they give you a quote in the question, sometimes you can avoid reading because they're giving you the information they want you to look at. And that way you only have to evaluate that sentence and not an entire paragraph. Interesting, huh?
Yeah.
It's a lot. It really is a lot. But you'll get it. Every one of you will pass it. All right. One of the things that they sometimes will do on the GED test, you won't just have multiple choice A, B, C, D. Sometimes you will drag and drop answers into an image. And that's what this is. So you'll get a little reading just like this. And then the directions are drag and drop the 3 most logical inferences. What is the author saying without actually saying it? It's kind of like one of those, tell me that you love school without telling me you love school. One of those kind of things. So looking at that first paragraph, someone has to speak for them because they have to a person lost the power to speak for themselves. I'm referring to that great mass of Americans who were once known as the salt of the earth, then as the silent majority, more recently as the viewing public, and now, alas, as couch potatoes. What drives them, or rather leaves them sapped and spineless on their reclining chairs? What are they seeking beyond such obvious goals as a tastefully colorized version of the Maltese Falcon? Couch potatoes, people who watch TV all day. Drag and drop the 3 most logical inferences from the table into the web. So our center is couch potatoes. Would couch potatoes lack purpose and motivation? Would that be a good one to link to it?
Yes.
Yeah, that's a very good one. Do they watch too much television?
Yeah.
Yep, that's another one. Are they worn out from work?
No.
Yeah, it doesn't talk
last.
about that, does it? They very likely could be, but not based on what we read. So then have few interests.
Yeah.
So that one's perfect. If you got rid of one, you know, the last one's going to be one of them. I kind of like the drag and drops. You'll probably get them correct. They seem to be a little more clear. Whoops. And then let's do spudding out and we'll call it a day. Spudding out. My goodness, I'm not even sure what that is. We'll find out. We're looking for an implied main idea. So it's not the stated main idea, but an implied main idea. And what is the most logical inference to make from the information in paragraph 2? Kind of forced to read it. It's short, so it's okay. My husband was the first in the family to spud out, as the expression now goes, Soon, everyone wanted one of those zip-up couch potato bags to keep warm during David Letterman. The youngest and most thoroughly immobilized member of the family relies on a remote that controls his TV, stereo, and VCR, and can also shut down the neighbor's pacemaker. This is kind of a comedic, a funny thing, but we never see the neighbors anymore, nor they us. This saddens me because Americans used to be great and restless people, fond of the outdoors and all of its manifestations, from Disney World to miniature golf. Some experts say there are virtues in mass agoraphobia, that it strengthens a family and reduces highway deaths. But I would point out that there are still a few things that cannot be done in the den, especially by someone zipped into a body bag. These include racquetball, voting, and meeting strange people in bars. Who wrote this? Oh, I don't know who she is. I'll bet she's a comedian or a humorist writer. So the implied main idea, what is she wanting you to think this is about without actually saying it? It is difficult to understand why people want to watch old movies. It's too much attention to televised sporting events. Sorry, let me rephrase that. Too much attention to televised sporting events causes problems. Arguing over television program choices can strain family harmony, or watching too much television can lead to decreased physical activity. So which one of those was she relaying?
D?
Too much attention to televised sporting events?
D.
I was thinking
D
B.
like dog. Yeah, D like perfect. Yep, watching too much TV can decrease physical activity. And now we binge watch things. What is the most logical inference to make from the information in the second paragraph? People do not go out of their homes as much as they did in the past. Families spend more quality time together. Because families stay at home, there are fewer car accidents. Or strangers now have television-related topics to discuss when meeting for the first time.
B.
Families spend more quality time together. It has to be, right? There are virtues in mass agoraphobia. Agoraphobia is a fear of being around other people or fear of outdoors. People who are agoraphobic stay inside. They don't socialize. That it strengthens a family and reduces highway deaths. So perfect. It increases family time. Nice. What'd you think of those?
That was pretty good.
Yeah, and there's a couple more in that packet that you can do. And if you do them, you can snap a photo if you want some feedback on them. We did one of the long readings last week, but you can always do it again because it wasn't a super easy one. And there's so many different kinds of writing that you have to get through. You know, there's a kind of sarcastic humorous. And if you don't realize that it's sarcastic, it can seem like a very strange piece of writing. And you're not going to get a warning. They're not going to say, oh, this was by Dave Barry, the humorist writer. So you come in knowing it's probably going to be, you know, sarcastic and funny. You just you get stuck reading it and you kind of have to assess it as you go. Classic literature is a little more difficult. The language they use is not the language we use today. The words they use are different than the words we use today. There are a lot of words that have changed meaning over time. And so words that meant something 150 years ago mean something very different today. So it can be tough getting through that. One of the best things you can do for yourself is read everything you can get your hands on, or you can get your eyes on, because you can read off the internet. Try not to read novels necessarily, but maybe pieces of classic literature, like read a couple of pages out of Charles Dickens or Edgar Allan Poe. You don't need to check out the books and read the whole thing. Just read blips of them, because that will get you familiar with the way people used words previously. And writers from the 1800s, US and European writers, had a lot of time to put words together, a lot more time than we seem to have today. So it can be very hard to get through all that, but you will. And just give yourself a break, practice reading. You know, you can look it up. You can look up all sorts of authors. I have resources. I can send you some classic stories, you know, short stories.
Yeah, it will be great.
Would you like that? I've got, yeah, I think I have a whole pack.
Yes. Yes.
Some of
Change
them
that
are a
up.
little broad. I know that. Some of it is not that interesting. It's like, oh my God, how am I going to slog through this? But it at least gives you that view of a different language. And for those of you who are coming in with English as your second language, you have another layer of digging through, because sometimes you're translating and you're looking at a word and you're just like, I have no idea what they're talking about. And it's, you know, it's just, you gotta trust yourself. If it's a problem that's taking too long, just pick an answer. You can flag it on the test, but pick an answer. You don't want to leave anything blank, and don't worry about it. You're not going to get 100%. Don't spend time on things that you're just like, I have no idea what they're talking about. It's hard to do, because you look like, oh, I know if I spend a few more minutes on it, I can get it. It's like, answer the other stuff first, then come back to it.
Okay.
Always mark an answer. Excellent. Any questions? And I'll send you all the packet of classic literature.
Yeah,
Like,
that will
oh
be
my
great.
God, I want
Yeah,
to
that
read.
will be great.
Yeah, I'll make sure you get that, Sultan.
Yeah, okay.
And you don't have to read it all, just read bits.
Okay.
Because what you're doing is you're familiarizing yourself with another form of language.
Yeah, I have
And
an idea.
Yeah. And it'll be a little less daunting when you get something like that on the test. You'll be like, oh, okay, yeah, this is from 1832. It's going to be completely different than something I would read today.
Yeah.
And the social studies test is problematic, because all of it's mostly US history, right?
Yes.
And the majority of the US was built in the 1700s. So the documents are hard to get through. It's not the way we talk. It's not the way we use words. So,
Yeah.
All right, well, I will let y'all go, and I'll get that sent out to you, the nice big reading of classic literature.
Yeah.
And anything you can get your hands on to read it. If you've got 5 minutes, just go, even open up news apps and read some of the more interesting stories, just to get used to running that information through your head and assimilating it. And that will help immensely. And if anybody feels like you're not a fast reader, read out loud. It sounds weird, it works. If you want to be a faster reader, read everything you can out loud. Your speed will improve drastically. And as your speed improves, so does your comprehension. And so if you have kids or pets, super easy. You can read to your kids or your pet. If you're by yourself, read to the mirror, or read to your parents or to your grandparents. You know, somebody will love to listen to you read.
Yeah, surely.
All right. Well, you guys have a good day. Tomorrow is science. We're going to do chemical equations.
Okay. Hopefully.
And do not
Yeah.
be concerned if you don't get it tomorrow. We'll do them again.
Okay.
All right, everybody. I'll talk to you soon.
Yeah. Thanks. Thanks a lot.
Have
Have
a
a
great
good day.
Bye. Thank you.
Bye.